Get ready. This book's about to rattle some bones. Yo! Oh, wait a minute. That's the wrong talking skeleton. Hey there, everyone. Afrodo Reviews here, bringing you another book to determine, is that worth reading of a second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? So let's decide. The Scepter of Ancients is the first book in the Skulduggery Pleasant series, written by Irish author Derek Landry, and first published on April 3rd, 2007. It has 14 sequels to its name, along with 10 short stories that act as sort of in-between stories between the various sequels. I haven't read any, although one is in the back of this book. I'll probably talk about it sometime later. The book is also quite well received, having won several awards that I could find. These awards include the Red House Children's Book Award, the Bolton Children's Book Award, and the Staffordshire Young Teen Fiction Award. The book was also recommended for Confident Readers 9+ by the Richard and Judy Children's Book Club in 2007, and won the Portsmouth Book Awards in 2008, having been selected by school children in Portsmouth. Also, in 2009, it won the Curnow Youth and Grampian Book Awards by a majority vote. In 2010, Skulduggery Pleasant was awarded the title of Irish Book of the Decade after being up against some of the world's bestsellers. Naturally, that should tell you just how well received the book is, but for some small further emphasis, here's my report card. To avoid getting too caught up in the merits of the book, let's move on to where we always start with these reviews, and that'll be the cover. Now, I have one of the various covers. I've seen a couple really good ones, but the one I currently have, I can't help but admit that I'm a little bit disappointed in for the book that it's for. It's okay. This book sort of has this cover specifically, has almost a cheap quality to it. It's kind of the cover you would find on a book that was either self-released or one of those books that was released but with a clear, Christian agenda, so it was released purely on the merit that it was a Christian book rather than if it was good. You can see the titular Scepter of the Ancients front and center, which I do somewhat appreciate, but it doesn't. It looks like a cheap 3D model rendering of it, with the lightning that comes out of it very clearly photoshopped in behind it. The scepter itself glittens a bit, but again, that's one of those. It's clearly glistens are clearly photoshopped in, and there's a red background that's very washed out behind it in a sense. You can't really make out much other than this one building in the lower right hand corner, and because of that, it's just kind of there. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's one of those. It just feels odd. It makes the book, again, it gives it a cheap looking quality to it. The back, though, I will give it this credit. The back, though, changes its color scheme to contrast more with the front, taking more of a darker green while giving you a synopsis of the book. Now, the synopsis is actually pretty decent. It tells you what the book's about. I didn't read it in this TBR. Instead, I did a New Year's resolution video, so I apologize for that, but I'll try to be a little more in-depth with the synopsis. But yeah, apart from that, this cover, like I said, it's okay. It's not great. I think some of the other covers I saw while looking this book up very much speak a bit more to the book's quality than this current one. So to move on to the synopsis of this book, again, because I didn't really read it in my TBR, this book is about a young girl named Stephanie who has recently inherited her uncle's estate, a famous occult writer, or I guess a detective writer. Let's just say a famous fantasy writer who left her his entire estate. And while she's at his house one day, she's accosted by a man who seems to be looking for a key, only to be saved by the mysterious friend of her uncle's, a man named Skulduggery Pleasant. During this time, she discovers Skulduggery Pleasant is not only just not a normal person, he's actually a walking skeleton. No, not that one. The other one. He doesn't have an afro. This hair's fake. After that, after basically being attacked by someone who's clearly looking for something her uncle had, Stephanie decides that she can't just sit behind, and also desperately wants to get into this world of urban fantasy. So, she decides to help Skulduggery Pleasant in discovering who wants this key, and more importantly, who killed her uncle. And I'm going to leave off there because anything more will definitely be a spoiler for those of you who want to go into the book blind. So I'll move on to the review proper. Again, I'm going to preface this. I'm going to try to be as non-spoilery as possible, but I will preface this that there may be some spoilers ahead. So fair warning. Simply put, I love this book. This book was great. I'm kind of disappointed I didn't read it earlier back in the days when I was the target audience for it. Because it's very clearly more of a young adult children's novel than it is a straight novel. It's best compared to The Lightning Thief or the Percy Jackson and the Olympians. In more ways than one when it comes to just being positive, but also in a slightly negative way. I'll get into that a bit, but it's a very good book. The characters have a very nice chemistry with each other. There's that distinctive Irish wit in all their interactions that just is a chore to read. And I actually chuckled a few times while reading rather than just the standard way you laugh at stuff in the book where you just... You know what I mean? The character dynamics, though, are really great. The way Stephanie gets along with both Skulduggery Pleasant and later on a character named Tanith is just very believable and very nice to see. The story itself is also very great as well. I was honestly waiting for the next thing to happen. I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to see what the mystery was. I wanted to see how they were going to do these things. And it was, again, all very good. I have very little complaints in terms of the story itself. For the most part, I can only glowingly recommend this book to anyone who's interested in urban fantasy or something like that. Now, but with that being said, I'm going to quickly talk about something about this book that made me worried. It's specifically regarding the ending. Again, I'm going to try to talk about this without spoiling, but to simplify it, the ending of this book feels like it's too soon. And to further my point, what I mean by this is, okay, I made that Percy Jackson comparison earlier, and that was without reason. For the most part, the first part of this book feels entirely like the Lightning Thief. Not as a ripoff, don't get me wrong, but in a sense to how it's written. Now, both handle it in somewhat different ways. Obviously, this is more mimicking old Greek tales and their tragedies. Skulduggery Pleasant's more of an urban fantasy detective novel in a sense. I would actually say, in overall likeness, I would compare it more to the Dresden Files than I would Percy Jackson, but I'm getting very off topic here. Imagine the feel of this book, how it's the start, how the characters are dealing with something and the stakes are high, but it's not the biggest stakes. It's not building up to this huge gigantic climax that The Last Olympian has. The Last Olympian is the climax of the story started in this book. Now, I say that like this because Skulduggery Pleasant, or the Scepter of Ancients, as it was later renamed, is a book that tries to be this book, but have this book's climax, if that makes sense. It basically, it's trying to be too grand with too little build-up. There's a lot of things that the author does in this book that would, again, be better suited for books later on in its lifespan. With the way this book ends, there's very few ways that it can really raise the stakes as it goes on. And if those are the only few ways that can do it, you kind of already know where this series is going to go. And I don't just mean that with the knowledge that this book has 14 sequels. I mean that with the knowledge that even if this book was a standalone, I would have said that this book tries to do too much for its climax with not enough build-up. Again, I keep making this comparison, but it's it's as trigger happy as The Last Olympian is, but you didn't have 4 books to get to know all the characters, if that makes sense. So in a sense, when I say that, I mean solely that this book should have waited a few more books before it did the climax that it does, or it tries to do the type of climax that it does, if that makes sense. I'm struggling for words here. I apologize. I try to do these without looking at my script too much. Honestly, with the decisions made, I can't help but feel that Landry thought this would be his only book that he wrote. And that's probably true. Again, this was renamed from Skulduggery Pleasant to Scepter of the Ancients. So it's entirely possible that when Landry wrote this was the only book that he planned to write and changed his mind later. But still, I feel that the ending wasn't earned completely. It wasn't earned completely. Again, this book is very good. Don't let me put it wrong. All in all, I would actually probably give this book a 7 out of 10. Now, some of you who are fans of this series may think I'm being I'm cheating the book out of a higher rating, and I want to assure you, it was super close. This is one of those books that was so close to an 8 that it was basically like a 7.8, but it wasn't close enough to justify rounding it up. Just like there was no way I could give it a 6 and feel comfortable with it. The 7 is the best choice, even if it feels a little dirty even to me, because it doesn't feel like it earned an 8 for me. Again, this is my personal ranking system, and however, if you are looking for a nice urban fantasy, think something like Percy Jackson mixed with Dresden Files almost, I would recommend picking this up. It's got a great wit, it's a great story. As much as I complained about what it did, I really am looking forward to the next book. And there's just a lot of it that I would highly recommend. And because of that, the question of whether or not it deserves Mount Doom is obviously no. Because this book is worth a read. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that book. Honestly, I'm hoping that the books this month continue to be that good. I'm feeling quite graced by it. But with that being said, just remember, with every book comes an adventure. And every adventure is worth having, even the bad ones.